oh, God, this is horrible. Because it was really a very, very long days, and it was a very heavy thing. It's not as heavy as the original was, but we're weaker.
Ghostbusters became a cultural phenomenon in 1984, grossed over $300 million worldwide, and spawned a franchise that's still going 40 years later. But the behind-the-scenes chaos, last-minute panic decisions, and personal drama that created this film are even wilder than the movie itself. Today, we're counting down 15 wild facts about Ghostbusters that'll change how you watch four guys running around New York with proton packs. From dangerous practical effects to the tribute hidden in the movie's most famous ghost, to the government conspiracy that almost made it into the final cut. But before we bust any ghosts, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the movies that defined the 1980s. Drop a comment with your favorite Ghostbusters quote, because who you gonna call? Us, apparently. All right, let's jump into number 15. Number 15, Bill Murray improvised most of his lines and drove everyone insane. Bill Murray barely showed up to script meetings. When he did show up, he'd glance at the pages, toss them aside, and announce he'd figure it out on set. Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis spent months carefully crafting a script that balanced comedy with supernatural adventure. And Murray treated it like a loose suggestion he could ignore whenever he felt like it. On set, Murray would completely rewrite scenes in real time. The other actors had learned their lines, blocked their movements, rehearsed their timing. Then Murray would show up and do something completely different, forcing everyone to adapt or look like they were in a different movie. The iconic "he slimed me" line, totally improvised. Murray got covered in the green goo, and instead of saying whatever was scripted, he just reacted naturally with disgust and perfect comedic timing. Director Ivan Reitman realized the improvised version was better and kept it. Aykroyd and Ramis were brilliant comedy writers, but Murray's chaotic energy as Peter Venkman turned what could have been a straightforward character into the sarcastic heart of the film. Venkman was supposed to be one of three equals. Murray made him the star without asking permission. Reitman eventually learned to just let the cameras roll and capture whatever Murray decided to do. Sometimes it was genius, sometimes it was unusable. But the moments that worked elevated the entire film beyond what the script could have achieved alone. The problem was that Murray's improvisation made him impossible to work with. He'd show up late, refuse direction, and act like the entire production existed for his amusement. It created tension that would eventually explode years later. But in 1984, his chaos accidentally saved Ghostbusters from being too safe. Number 14. The studio was convinced it would bomb. Columbia Pictures executives sat through early test screenings and saw disaster. A comedy about paranormal exterminators. Horror mixed with laughs. A giant marshmallow man destroying New York. They thought the tone was confused, the concept was bizarre, and audiences would reject it completely. The budget didn't help their anxiety. $30 million was enormous for a comedy in 1984. Most comedies were cheap to make, relying on jokes rather than expensive special effects. Ghostbusters needed both, and the costs kept climbing. Studio executives wanted to cut the budget, scale back the effects, maybe rethink the whole Marshmallow Man finale. They pushed back on every expensive decision, convinced they were watching money burn. The production fought for every dollar, arguing that the effects were essential to making the supernatural threat feel real. Test audiences, however, loved it. Regular people who weren't studio executives watched Ghostbusters and laughed, cheered, and left the theater buzzing with excitement. The disconnect between executive panic and audience enthusiasm was massive. Columbia released the film anyway, but with low expectations. They didn't give it a massive marketing push. They positioned it as a summer movie that might do okay if they were lucky. The premiere happened, reviews came in positive, and then the box office exploded. Ghostbusters became the highest-grossing comedy ever made at that point, pulling in over $300 million worldwide. It dominated the summer of 1984, outselling films with bigger stars and larger budgets. Suddenly, every executive who'd predicted failure was taking credit for greenlighting such an obvious hit. Number 13, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man was added at the last minute. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is the most iconic image from Ghostbusters, but he wasn't in the original script. Early drafts had a completely different final villain, something darker and more traditionally demonic. Stay Puft didn't exist yet. Dan Aykroyd pitched the idea late in development as something innocent turned destructive. He wanted the final threat to be something that seemed harmless, a beloved mascot twisted into a monster. The contrast between cute branding and apocalyptic destruction felt perfectly absurd. The character was inspired by real corporate mascots like the Pillsbury Doughboy and the Michelin Man. Aykroyd imagined what would happen if one of those cheerful advertising icons became 100 feet tall and started demolishing a city. The answer was comedy gold. Building the costume was a nightmare. It weighed over 50 pounds, and the actor inside, Billy Bryan, nearly passed out from heat exhaustion during filming. The suit had limited visibility, restricted movement, and required multiple handlers to keep the performer from collapsing. Most of the destruction scenes used miniatures. The production built a scale model of New York streets and filmed a smaller Stay Puft puppet stomping through them. The final explosion that covers the Ghostbusters in marshmallow goo? That was real sticky substance that actors genuinely hated being covered in. Stay Puft became the breakout image of the film. Merchandise exploded. Kids wanted Stay Puft toys despite him being the villain. The character appeared in sequels, cartoons, video games, and every piece of Ghostbusters media for the next 40 years. All because Aykroyd had a last-minute idea about an evil marshmallow mascot. Number 12. Sigourney Weaver wanted to play her possessed scene as a dog. Sigourney Weaver had a bizarre creative vision for her possessed Dana Barrett scenes. When the terror dog takes over her body, Weaver wanted to play it literally. She asked director Ivan Reitman if she could act like an actual dog, down on all fours, barking, panting, the whole thing. Reitman looked at her like she'd lost her mind and said absolutely not. This was supposed to be a mainstream comedy, not an experimental art film. Having Sigourney Weaver crawling around barking at Bill Murray wasn't going to work. But Weaver was committed. She pushed back, arguing that if Dana was possessed by a demonic dog entity, the performance should reflect that. Eventually, they compromised. Weaver could incorporate some animalistic movements and energy, but she had to stay vaguely human. If you watch the possessed Dana scenes closely, you can see remnants of Weaver's original vision. There's something feral in her movements, the way she prowls, the predatory energy. It's not full dog performance, but it's definitely not normal human behavior. Rick Moranis also went full commitment when playing possessed Louis Tully as Vince Clortho. His bug-eyed terror and strange physicality made the possession feel genuinely alien. Both actors treated their possessed characters as actual performances rather than just silly horror parody. Weaver's comedic timing throughout Ghostbusters surprised everyone. She was known for dramatic roles, especially Alien. Watching her nail comedy opposite Bill Murray proved she had range most people didn't know existed. The fact that she wanted to bark like a dog shows just how committed she was to making even the weirdest choices work. Number 11, the firehouse is real and still a tourist attraction. Hook and Ladder Company 8 in Tribeca, New York City, is a real working fire station. It's been operational since 1865, And it's exactly what you see in Ghostbusters. The exterior shots of the Ghostbusters headquarters aren't sets or special effects. That's the actual building. The production had to work around actual firefighters doing their jobs. Filming schedules got complicated because real emergency calls would interrupt shoots. The crew would be setting up a scene, and suddenly fire trucks had to leave for an actual fire, shutting down production. The interior of the firehouse is much smaller than what appears in the film. All the headquarters interior scenes were built on a soundstage because the real building couldn't fit the pole, the containment unit, Ecto-1, and all the equipment the script required. The layout you see inside doesn't match the actual building's architecture. The firefighters working there got cameos in the film. If you watch closely during exterior scenes, some of the people hanging around are actual firefighters who were working that day. After Ghostbusters became a phenomenon, Hook and Ladder Company 8 became an instant tourist landmark. Fans started showing up constantly to take photos, see the building in person, and feel like they were standing at the real Ghostbusters headquarters. It's now one of the most photographed firehouses in the world, entirely because of a 1984 comedy about catching ghosts. Number 10, Dan Aykroyd wrote it for John Belushi, who never got to make it. Dan Aykroyd originally wrote Ghostbusters for himself and John Belushi. They were best friends, comedy partners from Saturday Night Live, and had starred together in The Blues Brothers. Aykroyd envisioned them as the core of this paranormal adventure. The original script was completely different. It was set in the future, involved interdimensional travel, had time-traveling elements, and was way more science fiction than comedy. Aykroyd's first draft was basically unfilmable, a sprawling cosmic adventure that would have cost $200 million to produce. The role of Peter Venkman was written specifically for Belushi. Aykroyd knew Belushi's energy, his timing, his ability to play both charming and obnoxious simultaneously. Venkman was designed around Belushi's strengths. Then on March 5, 1982, John Belushi died from an overdose at the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles. He was 33 years old. Aykroyd was devastated and nearly abandoned the Ghostbusters project entirely. Harold Ramis convinced him to keep going. They brought Ramis in as co-writer, and he helped ground the script in reality. The interdimensional time travel got stripped out. The story became simpler, funnier, more focused on character dynamics than cosmic sci-fi spectacle. Number 9, Slimer was designed to look like John Belushi. After Belushi's death, Aykroyd wanted to include a tribute somewhere in the film. He couldn't bring his friend back, but he could create something that honored Belushi's memory, in a way only Ghostbusters could. Slimer, the first ghost the team encounters at the hotel, was deliberately designed to resemble John Belushi. The round face, the wild manic energy, the obsession with food, all of it was pulled directly from Belushi's physical presence and personality. During production, the ghost was called Onion Head because of the unpleasant smell the puppet prop created on set. The name Slimer came later from marketing and the toy line, but the original intent was always to make this ghost feel like Belushi's chaotic spirit. The effects team was given specific instructions to reference Belushi's face when sculpting the ghost. If you look at photos of Belushi and compare them to Slimer's design, the connection becomes obvious. The chubby cheeks, the mischievous expression, the sense that this creature is having the time of its life, causing mayhem. The green color was chosen purely for practical reasons. It showed up well against the hotel's interior backgrounds and gave the ghost visibility in every lighting condition. But the personality, the physicality, that was all Belushi. Slimer became a breakout character despite having maybe 5 minutes of screen time. Kids loved him. The ghost got his own storyline in the animated series, became a beloved mascot and ended up as the friendly ghost mascot in Ghostbusters 2. What started as a tribute to a dead friend became one of the most recognizable ghosts in pop culture. Aykroyd found a way to keep Belushi in Ghostbusters after all, just not the way anyone expected. Number 8. The Ecto-1 was a barely functional disaster. The 1959 Cadillac Miller Meteor ambulance that became Ecto-1 was found in a state of decay. The production paid $4,800 for a vehicle that barely ran, had rusted parts, and looked like it belonged in a junkyard, not a major Hollywood film. The crew spent weeks making it camera-ready. They rebuilt the engine, fixed the bodywork, added all the custom ghost hunting equipment to the roof and sides, and prayed it would survive filming. It didn't. The car constantly broke down during production. Multiple times during New York City street shoots, Ecto-1 would die mid-scene. The crew had backup mechanics on standby because they knew the car would fail. Sometimes they had to push it into frame and hope it looked like it was running. The siren was real and incredibly loud. Neighbors complained constantly about the noise during filming. The production got citations from the city for noise violations because Ecto-1's siren was designed for actual emergency use and wasn't meant to be used repeatedly for movie takes. The interior was cramped, uncomfortable, and smelled terrible. The actors hated riding in it. Most interior shots of the team sitting in Ecto-1 were filmed separately on a soundstage with better lighting and space. The real car was too tight to fit cameras and actors comfortably. Despite being a mechanical nightmare, Ecto-1 became one of the most iconic movie vehicles ever created. It's up there with the DeLorean, the Batmobile, and James Bond's Aston Martin in terms of cultural recognition. The original car still exists and has been restored multiple times. Replicas sell for enormous amounts of money at auctions. A vehicle purchased for under $5,000 became worth hundreds of thousands purely because of one movie. Number 7. Rick Moranis almost didn't play Louis Tully. The character of Louis Tully was originally written for John Candy. The script described Louis differently than what ended up on screen, and Candy had his own vision for how to play the character. He wanted to make Louis a German character who had multiple dogs. It was a specific, weird choice that didn't match what writers intended. Creative differences led to Candy dropping out just weeks before filming started. The production suddenly had a major supporting role and no actor. Panic set in because recasting this late meant potential delays and budget overruns. Rick Moranis got the call and completely rewrote the character. He turned Louis into a nerdy accountant, socially awkward, desperate to impress his neighbors, and totally unprepared for demonic possession. Moranis brought a completely different energy than Candy would have. The famous party scene where Louis is locked out of his apartment was mostly improvised. Moranis ad-libbed his panicked attempts to get back inside while a terror dog hunts him through the streets. His frantic energy, the escalating desperation, all of that came from Moranis making choices in the moment. His comedic timing made Louis Tully a fan-favorite character. What was supposed to be a small supporting role became a major part of the film's charm. Moranis nailed the everyman terror of being hunted by a supernatural creature while just trying to survive a party. The character became bigger in Ghostbusters, too specifically because Moranis made Louis so memorable in the first film. Sometimes the best casting happens by accident, when the original choice falls through. Number 6. The library ghost terrified the actress playing her. Ruth Oliver played the library ghost in the film's opening sequence, and the transformation scene legitimately scared her. The character starts as a sweet elderly librarian ghost, quietly reading, almost peaceful. Then the Ghostbusters provoke her, and she transforms into a screaming skeletal nightmare. The practical puppet rig designed for the transformation was elaborate and horrifying. Oliver knew it was going to be scary, but she didn't fully understand how terrifying the final effect would look until she saw it in action during filming. The first time she saw the full transformation with all the special effects, makeup and lighting in place, she screamed. It wasn't acting. That was genuine fear caught on camera. The reaction you see from the Ghostbusters running away in terror mirrors what the actress felt, seeing herself become a monster. The makeup took over 3 hours to apply. Oliver sat in a chair while prosthetic artists built layers of decay, skeletal features, and demonic details onto her face. She could barely see through the prosthetics and had limited mobility once everything was in place. The entire transformation scene lasts maybe 5 seconds on screen. Hours of preparation, makeup application, lighting setup, and effects work for a brief moment of horror that establishes the supernatural threat. The library ghost puppet is now in a museum, preserved as an example of practical effects from 1980s filmmaking. It's still creepy, even sitting motionless behind glass. That opening scene set the tone for the entire film. It proved Ghostbusters could do genuine scares alongside comedy, and Oliver's terrified performance sold the danger. Number 5, Bill Murray and Harold Ramis didn't speak for over 20 years. Bill Murray and Harold Ramis were close friends before Ghostbusters. They'd worked together on multiple projects, trusted each other creatively, and had mutual respect. That friendship completely fell apart and stayed broken for over 2 decades. Tensions started during Ghostbusters 2 in 1989. Murray's improvisation and difficult behavior escalated. Ramis, who was trying to maintain structure and keep production on schedule, clashed with Murray's chaos. The working relationship got strained. The full falling out happened during Groundhog Day in 1993. Ramis directed, Murray starred, and their creative disagreements turned personal. Murray's behavior on set became increasingly difficult. Ramis tried maintaining professionalism, but the friendship couldn't survive the production. After Groundhog Day wrapped, they stopped speaking entirely. Ramis tried reaching out multiple times over the years. He'd send messages, attempt phone calls, try to reconnect. Murray ignored all of it. 2 people who'd created comedy classics together became strangers who refused to acknowledge each other's existence. This affected the Ghostbusters franchise for years. Talk of Ghostbusters 3 happened repeatedly. But Murray's refusal to work with Ramis killed every potential project. The entire franchise was held hostage by a personal grudge. They finally reconciled shortly before Ramis died in February 2014. Murray showed up at Ramis's house unannounced, they talked, and made peace. Murray has expressed deep regret about the wasted years, admitting he let stubbornness destroy a friendship that meant everything. Ramis died knowing they'd reconciled, which mattered more than any movie. But 20-plus years of silence, because of on-set conflicts, remains one of Hollywood's saddest feuds. Number 4, the Terror Dogs cost a fortune and barely worked. The Terror Dogs, Zool and Vince Clortho, were supposed to be the film's showpiece practical effects. The production spent enormous amounts of money building full animatronic creatures that could move, snarl, and look genuinely terrifying on camera. They looked incredible. The designs were demonic, detailed, and perfectly matched the film's supernatural mythology. When they worked, they were state-of-the-art effects that rivaled anything being done in 1984. The problem was, they almost never worked. The animatronics constantly broke down during filming. Servos would fail, movements would lock up, the creatures would freeze mid-action, and require hours of repairs. Every day with the Terror Dogs became a technical nightmare. Most Terror Dog scenes ended up using forced perspective, puppets, or extremely limited shots, where the full animatronics appear for just seconds. The production spent a fortune on effects they could barely use. The budget overruns from creature effects caused massive stress. Columbia Pictures was already nervous about costs, and watching money disappear into broken animatronic dogs didn't help executive confidence. Editors had to work around the limitations in post-production. They'd cut shots shorter, use different angles, and creatively hide the fact that these expensive creatures weren't functioning as intended. The final result looks seamless, but that's because editors salvaged a technical disaster. Modern CGI would have saved the production millions of dollars and months of headaches, but in 1984, practical effects were the only option. And sometimes those effects just didn't cooperate no matter how much money got thrown at them. Number 3. The EPA guy was legally right, and fans hated him for it. Walter Peck, played by William Atherton, is framed as the villain of Ghostbusters. He's the bureaucratic government agent trying to shut down the Ghostbusters, and audiences are supposed to hate him for interfering with our heroes. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Peck is 100% correct about everything. The Ghostbusters are running an unlicensed nuclear containment facility in the middle of New York City. They're storing highly dangerous paranormal entities with zero regulatory oversight, no safety protocols, and equipment that could explode at any moment. Peck is doing his job. He's protecting public safety from 4 guys who bought a firehouse and started trapping ghosts without asking anyone if that was legal or safe. When he demands to see their storage facility and they refuse, he's within his rights to get a court order. When the containment unit gets shut down and explodes, releasing every ghost back into the city, that's exactly the disaster Peck was trying to prevent. He was right to be concerned. The Ghostbusters' recklessness nearly destroyed New York. William Atherton got death threats from fans who hated Walter Peck. People would yell at him in public, call him names, and treat him like he was actually the villain. The role ruined his public life for years because people couldn't separate the actor from the character. Modern viewers rewatching Ghostbusters realize Peck had a point. The Ghostbusters are lovable, but they're also reckless criminals operating dangerous equipment without permission. Peck represents the frustrating reality that sometimes regulations exist for good reasons. The film works because we're rooting for the underdogs, but objectively, Peck is the responsible adult in the room trying to prevent disaster. Number 2, there's a deleted scene that changes the entire movie. There's a deleted scene from Ghostbusters that completely reframes the entire story, and it was cut for very good reasons. The scene takes place at Fort Detmering, a military installation, and reveals that the government has been studying paranormal activity for years. In this scene, we learn that ghosts aren't a new discovery. The military already knows they exist, has been researching them, and has protocols in place. The Ghostbusters aren't pioneers discovering the unknown. They're just civilians catching up to classified knowledge the government has been sitting on. This fundamentally changes the stakes. Part of what makes Ghostbusters work is that the team is breaking new ground. They're figuring out ghost-catching technology from scratch, convincing a skeptical world that the paranormal is real, and building something unprecedented. If the government already knows, then the Ghostbusters journey loses its magic. They're not trailblazers. They're just guys with slightly better marketing than a classified military program. Director Ivan Reitman cut the scene. After test audiences felt it deflated the wonder. Viewers wanted to believe the Ghostbusters were special, doing something nobody had done before. The Fort Detmering scene made them feel ordinary. The scene was fully filmed, edited, and nearly finished. It exists in the archives and appears on some special edition releases. But removing it from the theatrical cut was one of the best editing decisions in the film. Sometimes what you leave out matters more than what you keep in. The Fort Detmering scene proves that a good editor knows when to cut something that technically makes sense, but emotionally ruins the story. Number 1. Bill Murray improvised "He Slimed Me" and created an icon. We already mentioned Bill Murray's improvisation, but the "He Slimed Me" moment deserves its own breakdown because it represents everything that made Ghostbusters accidentally brilliant. The scene wasn't scripted that way. Murray was supposed to react to getting covered in ectoplasm with specific dialogue that explained what happened and moved the plot forward. Instead, Murray looked down at the green goo covering him and said what felt natural in the moment. "He slimed me" is simple, childish, and perfectly captures Venkman's personality. It's not technical jargon. It's not brave heroics. It's a grown man reduced to playground vocabulary because something gross just happened to him. That one improvised line defined how the Ghostbusters would talk about their job for the entire franchise. Getting slimed became the vernacular. The toy line used it. The cartoon used it. Video games, merchandise, sequels, everything adopted the language Murray created in one spontaneous moment. Director Ivan Reitman kept the take because it was better than what the script said. That's the mark of good directing, recognizing when an actor finds something authentic that the written page couldn't predict. Murray's chaos drove everyone insane during production, but moments like this prove why they tolerated it. His instinct for what felt real and funny in the moment elevated scenes beyond what careful planning could achieve. Ghostbusters works because it feels loose, spontaneous, like we're watching real people react to absurd, supernatural situations. A lot of that feeling comes from Murray refusing to stick to the script and trusting his gut. And there you have it. 15 bizarre facts about Ghostbusters that prove this movie succeeded despite absolute chaos behind the scenes. So, which fact shocked you the most? Did you know about the Belushi tribute? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us your favorite Ghostbusters moment.